Well, good morning, dear listeners and dear viewers, to another episode, week 2 of Navigating the New Normal in the Workplace with my dear colleague, Mr. Len Adams. Len, good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning, listeners and viewers. And good morning, Michelle.
Yes, here we are for week 2. And this week's topic, Len, is I've just graduated, now what?
Okay.
Yes, so we're now tackling the world of recent graduates, whether it's from a 2-year college or whether it's from a 4-year or from their master's, right? And looking and talking about what the workplace looks like for them, especially during this age of a pandemic. Let me quote the Atlantic. They said, by the end of the current academic year, American schools will have conferred an estimated 3.7 million high school diplomas, 1 million associate degrees, and 2 million bachelor degrees. Many of these 6 million plus graduates will soon pursue another degree, but many others will enter a historically terrible labor market and one that's especially brutal for young workers. Okay, well, we're not into negative chat, but I wanted to quote it. What do you think graduates are to expect in the labor market, Len?
Oh boy. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the listeners should know that Michelle and I made a decision last week that the topic was going to be a surprise each week.
Yes.
There's been zero preparation for this. This is the first time I'm hearing what the topic is. So this is completely extemporaneous.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
okay. Let's see how I do extemporaneously. First of all, this is not the first time the graduates are coming into a horrible market.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we can go back historically and look at, even the year that I would have graduated, because I went at night, but the year I would have graduated was a horrible year, and people get through it. So there's a couple of things that graduates have to remember. First of all, okay, on a positive note, there's always attrition in the job market. Okay, so, you know, as bad as things seem to be, positions do get created. Now, there may not be as many in a market like this, but they're out there. You know, there are industries that will still hire and still absorb people and still have need to bring people up the ladder. So it's a matter of a bit more research, a bit more digging in and looking harder. You know, you're not going to come out on June 25th and be working July 1st. You have to really dig in and be prepared maybe for a longer time. What I suggest to people is, I'm sorry, that drawer was driving me crazy. What I suggest to new graduates is, first of all, be open to trying new things, number one. Don't be closed-minded relative to type of position, compensation. You know, every graduate comes out and says, okay, I want 75,000,
right,
you know, a new Porsche and, you know, an unlimited expense account. And that's probably not going to happen. So you may have to take something maybe below your expectation just to get into the job market, and recognize that things will get better over time. And, you know, you may have to make a couple of moves in your career to catch up, okay? Because we all know if you stay in one job for a very long time, even though I've done that, you don't always catch up. So you may have to make moves to get your salary up to par, okay? Especially when you're coming in a lower position or a lower salary range because of the market. But in terms of, you know, how do I do that? What do I do? You know, there's not much out there. You know, tap into your alumni network. Every college has a great alumni network. Don't be afraid, ashamed, or embarrassed to tap into it.
Right.
Reach out to people to network, even if it's not for a job within their company. You can ask for advice for the industry they're in and see where they could point you or give you some good advice as to, what you can do. Don't downplay starting out as a temp somewhere.
Right.
Okay? I could tell you, we have a client in the past 2 years brought on maybe 20 college graduates in a particular, because they had a specific project. And what they told us was this project will probably lead to a full-time job. And they hired just about every single one of them. And they stayed on as temps for maybe 6 or 8 months. And then they brought them on as full-time employees in a great environment. It was a bank, and moved their career. So don't poo-poo it. And, I have to tell you, to get 20 people in a market over the last 2 years before this, and tell 20 college grads you're going to start as a temp, it was like, what, are you crazy? I'm not starting as a temp. But we really had to convince them that, this is a good opportunity. And every single one of them came back and thanked us, because they wound up with an excellent opportunity, great salary, and, great training. So don't poo-poo that. Temp jobs can oftentimes lead to a full-time position, especially in a market like this, where companies sometimes are reluctant to make a full-time hire. They're not sure where the workflow is going to be or what their budgets are going to be like. But if you go in many times as a temp, you become part of the woodwork. And before you know it, you're there, and they really start relying on you. And before you know it, you get hired. So, and I've had that numerous times in my career when I was running another company. I'll never forget, we had this is going back many years, when we had paper files. We had a backlog of files that had to be filed. And I brought in a temp. And before I know it, she would get the filing done and say, what else do you need me to do? And I said, oh, okay, can you help me with this? And inside of 3 months, it was like I needed her. She was there every day, and she kept looking for work and finding things to do to help me.
There you go.
Created a full-time job for her. And if you would have asked me 3 or 4 months earlier, was I going to hire? I said, no, I'm not going to hire. But this is what happens oftentimes. So don't poo-poo it. And you're going to have to do your research. You may have gone to school to be in hospitality management. Well, you know what? That's probably not a growing field today. So look to see where your skills are transferable. Hospitality management could lead to some sort of customer service role in another industry, maybe in the medical industry, maybe in the technology industry. So, look to see where you could utilize your skills elsewhere. As I like to say, when you're supposed to zig, sometimes you have to zag.
That's right. I like that. You got to zig and zag. You've mentioned so many helpful tidbits. I want to go back to when you mentioned taking a position that's below expectation. I think it's a good point to make, because regardless of where, what year you graduate, I think there's always going to be that point of uncertainty, like, what's my next job? And you have to be open to opportunities, right? And actually, yeah, I think that I know I did it. I did internships. I took temp positions, and they gave me insight into that field, invaluable insight. Len, what would you suggest to a graduate who's putting their resume out there? What definitely should they have on their resume to show that they can do the job?
Any internships they may have done, any part-time work they may have done, even if it was delivering newspapers. Delivering newspapers is equivalent to being in your own business, right? You're your own boss. You have to get up in the morning, or on the weekend, you have to get there. You have a deadline to get the papers out. So, show those skills and showcase. Think of anything you've done throughout high school and college, outside of school. Also think of what you've done inside of school, any clubs you were a member of, any organizations that, you were the vice president of the school newspaper. Okay, so that shows leadership, that shows dedication, that shows the ability to meet deadlines. It shows maybe sometimes managing a team. If you were there, maybe you were in the Glee Club, I don't know, but show these things. If you don't have anything else, if you didn't work, then think about what you did in school that could be equivalent to a job, okay? And showcase them. Let people know what you've done and what you can do, all right? The other, well, you just made a point about with taking a job. Don't be afraid to take a job, even if it's not what you were thinking, because you don't know where it could lead. Okay, and you know, unlike 100 years ago when I was a kid, we didn't take a job with we took a job back then with the expectation you were going to stay for a long time.
Right.
Now the economy is different, the world view is different. So, you know, people take a job, they work 6 months, then they go to something else, they try something else. Take something. It builds a network for you. It builds skills. It builds your confidence.
Right.
Again, even if it's under what you thought you were going to do, okay? Because if you're just sitting home and you don't take anything, then you start to have self-pity and you start to lose your self-confidence. And before you know it, you're out 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year. And then a potential employee is going to say, well, what'd you do the last year? Oh, I looked. All right, you looked. You couldn't find anything. There was not one job you could find. Okay, you know, you couldn't deliver pizza. Do something. Do something, at least for your own self-esteem. And you never know who you're going to meet and run into. And talk to everybody and let everyone know you're looking. Okay, no matter how simple it may seem or silly. Ask everyone you know. Tap into your parents' networks. Okay, you don't know who their friends are and what they could do for you.
Len, is the cover letter dead?
I have to tell you, I rarely read cover letters. This is me. All right, I go right to the resume because the cover letter usually accomplishes one of two things. It's targeting exactly what the candidate thinks is the job, and they're going to tell you all the things that they think you want to hear. And that, to me, it's a lot of fluff. You know, we have, at least in most companies, we're getting multitudes of resumes every day coming in. And when you add the additional 20 or 30 or 40 seconds to read that cover letter and add that on to looking at the resume, we're more interested in the resume, okay, than the cover letter. At least that's my opinion. That's how we work.
If someone,
so yes, the cover letter is dead. If it's not dead, it's dying a slow death.
Okay. However, if they ask for a cover letter, give it to them, right, Len?
Absolutely. And spell check.
Oh.
Grammar check. You know, there's a great program, and I think there's a free version. There's also a paid version, and I don't have stock in it, so I'm not promoting it for any reason other than I use it personally. Called Grammarly.
Yes.
Okay, I run everything I write through it. Okay, and I'm writing a long time, but I still find things and mistakes that I make, or grammatical mistakes, spelling mistakes. Run it through, because that is your representation. Even your resume. Okay, run it through Grammarly. Have other people look at it. Okay, check it, double check it, triple check it. Because the last thing you want to do is put something out that is a representation of you that has a misspelling, a grammatical error, or, you know, any one of the above.
Yes,
so be
absolutely.
very, very careful. Even in your emails.
Ooh.
Even in your emails. Oh, yes.
Boy. Yeah. I mean, I'll go the extra step and say, watch what your email address is. You know, if it says stripper
hot lady 32.
Yes.
Right.
You know, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having an email with that name, but if you're looking for a gig, you may want to consider one that's a little bit less how can I say colorful, descriptive. And so you're absolutely right about I remember one of my resumes did have one misspelling on it, but the individual told me, and I was like, wow, I totally missed that. And you know, I think mistakes happen, you miss things, and you really make an effort to try to avoid that. But you know, if you really give off a good interview, right? If you
I mean, it's not the be all and end all, but you know, I'll tell you a story. Years and years ago, I wrote a brochure, and I worked on this brochure for months and months and months. And I had several people proof it. I proofed it, and this is before computers and, you know, Grammarly and all that. And everybody signed off on it and said, "Yep, looks great." I sent it to the printer. We printed 2,000 of them. They came back. I had them in the office. A friend of mine was an accountant. He came to visit me one day. I handed him the brochure. I said, hey, Tommy, take a look at my brochure. What do you think? He opens it up, reads the first page, and said, you have a misspelling.
Oh.
I said, what? He said, yes, you spelled community. I'll still remember this. Community was C-U-M-M-U-N-I-T-Y instead of C-O-M.
Oh.
I said, oh, my God.
My
Okay, now I had 2,000. I was working for somebody. I said, what do I do here? So we used it. Do you know not one person ever picked up that misspelling?
Really?
Other than him? God, hand to God. No one ever else picked it up. It was amazing to me. Okay. But at that point, 2,000 brochures was expensive back then. I couldn't throw them out. So we said, all right, we'll take a shot. We'll see what happens. And I would make a joke of it with people. I'd say, you didn't pick it up. It's a contest. If you pick up the misspelling in there. So, you have to try to turn it around then.
That's right.
So be careful. Yeah. But be careful. Be careful.
Yeah. So since we're
and yes, on that email point, that
yes.
the email, and there's a lot of controversy too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to throw something out there.
Please.
Pictures on resumes. Pictures on resumes.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. Now, there's one school of thought that says, well, you could put the picture on the resume because people can go on LinkedIn and
see you anyway.
Okay. But I'm still not a fan of pictures on resumes. I subscribe to the old school that you don't want to put your picture out there. And theoretically, people are not supposed to go and search for you if they sent your resume anyway. So I still advocate keeping it off. Okay. Also, I guess we could talk about resumes a little bit if you'd like.
Please.
Be careful what you put on in terms of extracurricular activities, clubs you belong to. I'm a proud member of the U.S. Communist Club. Okay, well, you may want to tone that down a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a fair point. In speaking about the don'ts, you mentioned spelling, what you put on the resume. Let's talk about interviews, right?
Okay.
Let's talk about interviews. 6 months ago, it was in person. Now they're all virtual. What absolutely is a don't during virtual interviews? And
during virtual?
Yeah, and we're talking about virtual etiquette here.
Yes, absolutely. That's a good point. On a virtual interview, first of all, treat a virtual interview as if it were an in-person interview. Dress the part, okay? Wear the suit and tie as if you were going into an interview.
That's right.
I know there's a lot of controversy on that. I think you treat it as if you're there in person,
Absolutely.
okay? Be careful with your background.
Yes.
Okay? I see some people, they're in their bedroom, the bed's unmade, there's crap all over the place. Clean it up, make it look presentable. If at all possible, try to go to somewhere else. Now,
Yes.
now I know if that's where your computer is, it's difficult, but you can do a Zoom interview with your phone or with a laptop or with an iPad. So maybe you can go to, a blank wall where there's nothing behind you. Zoom has a great tool where you could upload a background. So, maybe you can upload something. I did a Zoom call with one of my suppliers a few weeks ago, and she was in this beautiful apartment. It was a penthouse. I said, "Oh, your apartment's beautiful." And she said to me, "It's not my apartment, it's a background." So if you ever saw my apartment, it's a little tiny shack, a little tiny apartment in Queens. You thought this woman was on Fifth Avenue, okay, overlooking Central Park, but that's the background. So, something like that may make sense, even if it's a conversation piece. And you could say, you could be upfront about it, but at least it gives you something to talk about. But, be careful with your background. Show up on time. Yes. Make sure that there's very little distraction in the background with noise. And I know it's difficult if, especially if you're a college graduate and you have young brothers and sisters around, and they're yelling and screaming. I think interviewers are more forgiving today
yes.
of that situation because of the world we're in, but try to keep it to a minimum. all right, so that it's not too much of a distraction. All right, you know, TV's in the background, radio's glaring and all that. Try to really, you know, get that down. And just like a normal interview, focus,
Yes.
pay attention.
Focus, pay attention.
You know, look at the camera. Now I'm doing the wrong thing right now.
Yeah, and
I should be looking at the camera.
And I'm looking
Okay?
at you, and
I'm
I could
looking
be
at the
looking
screen.
at, yeah.
Right. So I should be looking at the camera, which is
But then I'm not looking at
really
you.
looking at you, but then I'm not looking at you. So, but be aware of that, because as I'm looking at it now, I know I'm not looking at the camera.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So be aware of these things. Practice it. Practice it. The great thing about a Zoom or a telephone interview now is you can practice. You can practice for an in-person interview too, but you know, you can set yourself up how you're going to sit and all that. You know, the one negative is no one gets your handshake. So
Yeah.
some people do like, you know, some interviewers like to see what the handshake is like. You know, is it firm? Is it wimpy? Is it, you know, is it washy? Yeah, wet hands. So that goes away. Okay.
No,
but,
that's
you know,
good.
set yourself
That's a
up
good
for
point.
it.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I like your point about the Zoom backgrounds. I will say, if you're doing an interview, be mindful of the background itself. I mean, I think it's great. The individual you mentioned, I've seen some really snazzy apartments. I don't know if like a Corona advertisement, you know, on the beach is a,
Yeah.
you know, like, so like,
Absolutely.
use your judgment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Use your judgment. And, you know, even in terms of if you're in your room and you have, you know, your favorite movie was, I don't know, Goldfinger, I don't know. And you have a crazy poster up, you know, maybe you want to turn it around
Turn
for the
that
purposes
around.
of the interview, you know. Again, it's a professional interview, so you want to treat it as such.
That's right. That's right. Let's talk about LinkedIn for a minute. We all use it. I say you shouldn't have all your eggs in one basket. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not sure what you mean by all your eggs in one basket in terms
Meaning, should individuals only apply for jobs via LinkedIn?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. You know, you have to apply through every medium there is. You know, all the career boards, all the job boards, research industries. Go online, target specific companies, and see what they have. They may not have their jobs on LinkedIn. You know, LinkedIn tells you every job is on there, but I'm going to tell you they're not. Okay. You know, and again, I don't own stock in any of these companies, but you know, Indeed, Monster, Career Builder, go on all of them and see what's out there. Go to industry associations and see some industry associations have specialty job boards. If there's an industry you're interested in,
Right.
Look at those. Okay. And you know, we brought up, there's another point I wanted to bring up. We were talking about backgrounds and all that.
Right.
Facebook is very interesting. Okay. Be careful what you post on Facebook.
Oh, we're going into a whole other,
I know we're going into
we're going
some interesting territory.
Yes, we
now,
are.
Again, legally, companies are not supposed to really search you out and, you know, look at your backgrounds. But let's be honest and pragmatic. People do it, okay? And when they see you over the weekend, now let me preface it by saying, what people do on their own time is their own business. And I believe that, and I agree with that 150%.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, we're in a competitive market. You know, when they see you, you know, chugging half naked, you know,
going to the club, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this is everybody's right to do what they want to do, but or at the very least, keep your Facebook private, so it's not open to everybody, right? So you know, be aware of that.
Be aware. I'm glad you raised that. You know, a lot of individuals, I don't know, you know, they think that perhaps when you post online that employers may not be looking at that. I will dare say that before you get that phone call or that email, they would have already looked you up.
They very well may. They very well may.
And whether it's right or wrong, ethical or not, it happens. So be prepared. Be prepared for it. Right, Len?
Well, I'll also tell you, you know, there's an interesting thought process on this of being 22 versus being my age, okay? Things you've done at 22 that go on social media and that go on the internet, they don't go away. They're there forever. So think forward, if you're 22, putting this stuff up there, and now you're 40 and you have 3 kids, do you want your kids seeing those, whatever it was? Not making judgments, but whatever it was, do you want your young kids, or maybe by that point, your teenage kids, looking at that and seeing it? So
that's a fair point. I'm thinking
right?
about my 20s and I've got photos, but they're in my possession,
Right, and not on Facebook.
And they're not on Facebook. And I mean, photos of any setting, right? I'm not talking about any compromising photos.
Right.
But the point is that that's a fair
They're
and
forever.
interesting. They're there forever, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. Let's talk about artificial intelligence.
Another great
ATS systems, right? Automated tracking systems. Can you explain to someone who perhaps never even knew what this is, why it's important?
Well, it's important because it really scans the resumes for certain keywords and certain patterns in your background, in terms of, even if it's not a specific keyword, it may be something you've done in your career, and it's going to bring you to the top of the list. Now, it's interesting because I wrote an article about a year or so ago, saying, and the premise was, will humans be replaced by artificial intelligence?
I remember that.
In human resources. And I'm of the school that humans will not be replaced, because I still believe in my heart that sometimes those words may bring you to the top, but you may not be a right fit personality-wise for a specific position. And conversely, the words may not be there, but in my interview with you, or in my initial screen, I'm talking about people now that are already in my system, I may remember something about you, okay? Or I may have a note about you that may mean you're a right fit for that position. So I think artificial intelligence is great for the processing quickly of resumes, but I don't think that it's going to be the be all and end all. I still think there's going to be the interview, and there's going to be that feeling, in the pit of your stomach, that, I like this person.
Sure.
They don't they don't check all the boxes, but there's something there that I think is a good fit. Okay, and artificial intelligence, I don't think is going to do that. Even with all the psychometric stuff and all the things they're talking about, maybe I'm old school, but I still think that there's something that the human being has that comes through in a connection. And I don't know if a computer could replace that. Okay, this is my opinion.
No, I agree. Computers don't have a soul. Excuse me.
No.
People like to think that they do, but they don't. Just to be clear, a resume should have the keywords that match up with the position that you're applying for, right? Absolutely. Right. So
they should be truthful. Don't just put the keywords because they're in the job.
Did you just look at my notes? We were just about to talk about transparency, right? Transparency. Yes. So from an ATS perspective, make sure that your resume matches the position that you're applying for.
I'm going to give you a perfect example. We get some jobs where they look for somebody who's bilingual, in German or Chinese or whatever, and we look at resumes, and obviously we search for that word, bilingual Mandarin or bilingual German.
There you go.
And we're going through, and then we start to look at names. And we say, this person, they went to school in Hong Kong. They grew up in Hong Kong, but it doesn't say Chinese. And I always take the position to my staff. I call them and ask, right?
There you go.
And I can't tell you how many times we'll call and say, do you speak Mandarin? They go, yeah. Why isn't it on your resume?
Put it on the resume.
Oh, I didn't think of it. Okay, so, look at your resume. Look at your background. Look, that's a strength. Look at your strengths. Look within. What do I have that a potential employer may want? No matter how minute it may seem, it may be a skill that's important, okay? It may be a software you used once 5 years ago. Make sure it's on there, okay? Maybe you were the treasurer of your school's newspaper, okay? And as treasurer, you paid the bills. So now you have accounts payable experience. Get that in there.
Get that in there.
Think it through. Think it through.
I agree. And just to expand a little bit on being transparent on your resume, know that whatever information you put down will be verified.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And
absolutely.
You want to talk a little bit about how you verify information?
Well, we ask every candidate for references, number one. We ask for manager, supervisor, and coworker. Okay, we want to get a picture of who the person was or is. So that's the first thing. When someone puts a skill on their resume, we ask them, where did you do it? When did you do it? How did you do it? Okay. And if you all of a sudden, and I'm going to date myself, if you become Jackie Gleason and go hamina, okay, we know you didn't do it. Okay. And most of the listeners out there aren't even going to know what I'm talking about with Jackie Gleason. It's scary to be so old. But anyway, right?
He's a comedian, and that's what he used to say.
Yeah, hamina. So make sure if you put it down there, be able to verify and justify that you've done it. Okay. And that leads me to maybe a pet peeve that I'll bring up as a recruiting firm. If you have zero of the skills and experience for a particular position, don't apply. You're wasting everyone's time, not the least of which is yours. You know, it's very easy today to just hit apply. I mean, we've been running some postings for my organization for clients. We had one spot up this week for a compliance specialist. I'm getting plumbers, salespeople. They don't have any of the skills, okay? So, you know, if you want to get your resume in front of me, don't send it to me for that posting. Reach out to me and tell me, look, I'd like to work with your organization. Do you have anything for me? We don't turn down resumes, at least we don't, okay? Because I always say never, I never say never, okay? So I may not have something for that particular skill set today, but I may have it next week or make them in tomorrow. So we always want the resumes anyway. But don't just apply blindly, because all you're doing is clogging up the system.
Right. So with a minute left, excuse me.
Wow, went fast.
I know it went super fast, but we covered a lot of ground, right, Len? I think valuable ground. I'm big on soft skills, interpersonal skills. Let's just talk a little bit about that. Why is it important to be personable when you reach out to folks and meet with them?
Why is it important to be personable?
Yes.
Well, I mean, it's a representation of you. But you know what? I'm going to say something. If you're an introvert, it may be difficult to come across as very personable. So, you know, try your best, okay? And, you know, everybody's not everything to everybody. So, you know, be true to who you are, okay? And I'll tell you, if you are an introvert, and there's nothing wrong with that, okay, don't come across as this wildly extroverted person on the interview.
Because that'll be weird.
It'll be weird, okay? And if that's the type of person the client or the company wants, and then you go in and you're in your hole, you know, you sit at your desk and you don't talk to anybody, then you say, what'd they send, their evil twin? What happened? So, you know, and the evil twin, that's a topic for another discussion when they send the evil twin in. So, you know, be who you are, okay?
Yes.
And find out. And if the job posting says we're looking for an extroverted person, which they may, all right? And that's not you. You can't force yourself into that job, okay? Because you're going to be unhappy anyway.
I agree. So, right, keeping in mind that they're introverts and extroverts, be true to yourself. Be true to yourself, professional. Think about your background. Think about your virtual background. Think about what you put on your resume, what's in it. Make sure that you check it. Use Grammarly. Ask someone to look at it. Be realistic, right? When you apply for positions.
Absolutely.
Have you demonstrated transferable skills? And if you don't have the skills for the job, then maybe that's an inclination to get them, but don't submit for a role or a position that you have no background in. Reach out to folks, right? You don't have to reach out to an entity like ACG, right? With Len Adams for a job. Reach out to just discuss what options are out there and stay positive. You know, that Atlantic article that I quoted, very informative, but really, really negative. And I don't think that we need to be negative about it. I think you should always be optimistic to the best of your ability.
I do want to make one more point on
Yes.
that. Don't be afraid to ask people for advice. Reach out to your networks, your parents' networks, your friends' networks, your alumni, even if it's not for a specific job. Ask, what can I do? Can you point me to someone? Okay, and especially nowadays with a lot of people working home, there's a lot less distraction in the office. So I'm finding a lot more people are easier to get on the phone, believe it or not. So, you know, don't be afraid to reach out to people.
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Well, Len, this was fantastic. I'm glad we did this, and I really look forward to folks giving us feedback on what their thoughts are. Next week, you'll get another surprise topic. I know you mentioned evil twin. Not quite ready for that yet. Let's see.
All right.
I'll have to look up. Thank you, dear viewers and dear listeners. Until next week, Len, hold on for a second. Don't move.
Thank you.